One Piece. It's not just anti government or anti tyranny. I'm going to argue that it targets something much more specific: the God of the Bible. I'm Chris Carlasio, and this is part one of a four-part series called The True One Piece. In this first video, I'm focusing on how the story frames its main villain and godlike beings in general, and why I think the target is not just generic tyranny or false gods, but monotheism itself. Then, in later videos, I'll show how the series inverts Genesis, the moral vision it pushes, and finally, why I think Luffy functions as an antichrist figure. I can't say for sure how fully aware Eiichiro Oda, the creator of One Piece, is of everything he's doing, but by the end of this series, I think it'll be clear that he knows more than enough to know better. And by the end of this series, I'll argue what the true One Piece really is, and why the story's answer is a counterfeit. Alright, so let's just get into it. Mary Joa is the capital of the world government, the villains of the series, and is literally called the Holy Land. Located at the top of the Red Line, it contains the Pangaea Castle, the Empty Throne, and the Domain of the Gods, where the world nobles or celestial dragons live. It has imposing cathedral-like architecture, and many characters who enforce or align with the world government dress in robes or stylized uniforms reminiscent of religious or monastic orders. The celestial dragons are explicitly treated as gods in world. Their residential area is called the Domain of the Gods, and their symbol, the hoof of the flying dragon, functions like a religious crest plastered over gates and statues. The ruling structure of that Holy Land involves 5 elders in robes, holy knights, and a hidden sovereign, Imu, on the empty throne. Imu-sama, or Imu, is clearly a stand-in for God, or the demiurge. This is Benedetta Revaglia's final thesis for a master's degree program in international relations at Ca' Foscari University of Venice from the year 2023-2024. Her thesis is explicitly about using manga, One Piece in particular, as a lens for international politics, framing manga and anime as soft power and connecting the story to topics like censorship, authoritarianism, human rights, cultural relativism, technology, and weapons. She's writing under academic supervision in that field. The title page lists a supervisor and assistant supervisor, and she treats One Piece as a text to analyze alongside political theory and international relations concepts. Concerning the demiurge figure of the franchise, Imu, she writes, "Only known through its silhouette and making brief appearances in a handful of chapters, Im-sama is the ruler of the entire world, occupying the empty throne. Im-sama is the most influential figure in the manga, possessing absolute power and capable of accessing all resources at the world government's disposal without scrutiny. Their existence remains a closely guarded secret, known solely to the 5 elders among the higher-ups of the world government. Although Oda has recently unveiled this character in the storyline, their motivations, the journey to becoming the ruler of the world, and ambitions remain mysterious. As of now, she is the only fact, is the absolute power held by this figure that no one dares to challenge." That's how she wrote that. For an extensive period, the 5 elders were perceived as the sole rulers of the world. They wield nearly boundless power, including absolute command over every agency within the world government. They have attained a quasi-mythological status, attributed to their seclusion in Pangaea Castle, the epicenter of political power. Among the authoritative figures in the manga's world, only a privileged few are privy to their existence, including the most potent pirates, high-ranking revolutionaries, commanders, and senior marine officers. However, With the revelation of Im-Sama in chapter 909, it has been established that Im-Sama is the one issuing orders, while the 5 elders follow their commands. This revelation reshapes the understanding of the world's power dynamics, challenging the perception of the 5 elders as the ultimate authorities. David Maiolo is a technology professional, author, and entrepreneur with a master's degree in information management systems from Harvard University. He writes, "The true, final antagonist is not a pirate, but the shadowy sovereign who sits on the empty throne, the architect of the void centuries' silence. Imu. The fight against Imu, the 5 elders, and their newly unveiled enforcers, the Holy Knights, is the war Whitebeard foretold, a battle that will engulf the entire globe and force the world to confront the truth of its own history. This is not a war for territory or treasure, but for the very soul of the world, a final explosive chapter in the 800-year struggle between the natural enemies of the gods and the tyrants who erase them from history." This concept of just rule, earned through love and sacrifice, stands in stark opposition to the very foundation of the world government's ultimate authority, an authority built not on benevolence, but on the world's most profound and closely guarded lie. At the center of the Holy Land of Mary Jawa, within Pangea Castle, sits the empty throne. Forged from the melted weapons of the 20 founding kings, it is the ultimate symbol of their sacred vow that no single person would ever sit upon it, that all nations would be equal, and that the world would never again be ruled by a single absolute sovereign. This ideal is the public-facing cornerstone of the world government's legitimacy, a promise of equality that leaders like King Cobra of Alabasta held in the highest regard. But in the deepest shadows of the world, this promise is revealed. But in the deepest shadows of the world, this promise is revealed to be a hollow fraud. The throne is not empty. The shocking, world-altering truth is that a single, secret monarch does exist, a shadowy figure known only as Imu. In the silent chambers of the castle, the world's highest public authority, the 5 elders kneel as subordinates, asking for the name of the light that must next be extinguished from history. Imu, a being of regal silence and absolute power, ascends the steps and sits upon the forbidden throne, the very existence upon the forbidden throne, their very existence a refutation of the world's entire political order. This revelation recontextualizes the entire nature of the world government. It is not a council of nations or a flawed republic struggling with corruption. It is a totalitarian monarchy hiding behind an 800-year-old deception. Imu is the ultimate tyrant, a ruler whose power is so absolute that their very name is a secret to the world they command. Their will is enacted through the 5 elders, their authority unquestioned, their actions unaccountable. This is a form of control that transcends mere political or military might. It is the power to shape reality itself. With a single command, Imu can wield an ancient weapon to obliterate an entire island, erasing the kingdom of Lulusia, hope I pronounced that right, from the map and from history in a single terrifying instant. Imu's interest is not in governance, but in curation, the meticulous pruning of history, and the extermination of any will that threatens their silent reign. Their obsession with figures from the past, like Joy Boy, and the present, like Luffy and Shirahoshi, reveals that the grand, chaotic movements of the world are not unforeseen events, but threats to a long-held secret order. The war for the dawn is therefore not a struggle against a faceless system or a corrupt institution. It is a war against a ghost on a throne, a final, inevitable conflict between the boy who embodies absolute freedom and the secret sovereign who represents absolute hidden control. So you could see, Imu is not some mere authoritarian human being. He is a deity-level being specifically modeled on the idea of God. He is the hidden demiurge behind the religious authoritarian humans. Maiolo writes, for most of history, the five elders were perceived as political figures, the ultimate bureaucrats of a global system. This perception, however, was a profound underestimation of their true nature. The events of the final saga have revealed a terrifying truth. The five elders are not merely rulers, they are monsters of incomprehensible power. Each one is a warrior whose strength rivals the greatest legends, each possessing what appears to be the awakened form of a mythical zone devil fruit, transforming them into demonic, otherworldly beasts. From the spider-like form of Saint J. Garcia, Saturn, to the skeletal horse of Saint Topman, Warcury, they are the literal demons at the top of the world's hierarchy, their ancient authority backed by a monstrous personal strength. Yet even these five godlike figures are not the ultimate power. They are merely the high priests of a hidden deity. At the very center of Pangea Castle lies the empty throne, a grand symbol meant to represent the equality of all nations, a promise that no single king rules the world. This is the world government's foundational lie. The throne is not empty. Sitting upon it, in the deepest shadows, is the world's one true and secret monarch, the enigmatic figure known only as Imu. The existence of Imu is the government's most protected secret, a truth so profound that to even learn of it is to be marked for erasure from history. Imu is a slender, silhouetted figure of immense and terrifying power, their commands carried out without question by the five elders. From the solitude of the Room of Flowers, Imu dictates the flow of history, pointing to a map to decide which lights must be extinguished. The destruction of the Luluzia kingdom was not an act of war, but a casual act of celestial pruning, a nation wiped from the map by a skyborn superweapon at Imu's silent command. Strongly implied to be an immortal figure from the Void Century itself, Imu is the living embodiment of the 800-year-old lie, the ultimate tyrant whose rule is built on the silence of a forgotten history. They are the final, overarching antagonist of the entire saga, the god against whom the Will of D is a natural enemy, and the ultimate obstacle standing between Monkey D. Luffy and a world that is truly free. Imu even dishes out apocalypse-level destruction. Maiolo writes, where Pluton is a monster of steel and Poseidon is a queen of the seas, the third and final ancient weapon remains the saga's most terrifying and profound enigma. Uranus, named for the primordial Greek god of the sky, is the ultimate ghost in the world's machine, a weapon whose nature, location, and even form are a complete mystery. For years, its existence was known only as the third name in a trinity of world-ending powers, a blank space in the historical record that invited endless speculation. Was it a flying warship to rival Pluton? A device capable of controlling the world's weather? Or, like Poseidon, was it a living being, perhaps a sky-dwelling creature of myth? The answer, or at least its first horrifying glimpse, appeared to have come not from a poneglyph, but from the heavens themselves. During the aftermath of the reverie, the world watched in stunned silence as the Luluzia kingdom, a nation targeted for rebellion, was not invaded or conquered, but simply erased. In a silent, cataclysmic event, a shadowy object appeared in the sky above the island, unleashing a torrent of energy that obliterated the nation in a single instantaneous flash, leaving nothing but a gaping hole in the ocean where it once stood. This act of casual, godlike annihilation was carried out on the direct, silent order of the world's secret king, Imu. This strongly suggests a terrifying possibility that the world government, the very institution that has committed genocide to prevent the revival of the ancient weapons, has secretly possessed one all along. If this skyborne weapon is indeed Uranus, it fundamentally recontextualizes the entire global power struggle. The government's fear of Pluton and Poseidon is not a fear of global destruction, but a fear of a challenge to their absolute monopoly on it. They are not trying to keep the world's most dangerous weapons out of the wrong hands. They are trying to ensure they remain the only hands that hold them. Uranus, then, is the hidden ace of the celestial dragons, the ultimate tool of their 800-year reign, and the final apocalyptic mystery whose full reveal will undoubtedly herald the beginning of the world's final war. Eiichiro Oda himself has said, "I'm not very religious myself. My apologies to all the religious people out there." You know, maybe he feels guilty. He knows the kind of messages he's putting in there. He's very sorry. Ravaglia writes, "A prevalent theme within the world government is holiness. Mary Joie, its political center, is called the Holy Land. The 5 elders reside in the sanctuary, and all the world nobles have the title saint preceding their names." And Maiolo adds, "The world nobles or celestial dragons are not merely corrupt individuals within a system. They are the living embodiment of a system built on absolute, unearned, and unaccountable power. Descendants of the 20 kings who conquered the world 800 years prior, they exist in a state of divine right, a caste of living gods for whom the concept of law, morality, and consequence are utterly meaningless. Strolling through their holy land of Mary Joie or the groves of Sebayoidi, I don't know, encased in bubble helmets to avoid breathing the same air as commoners, their every action is an assertion of their superiority. They can murder a citizen for looking at them, enslave a person for the crime of crossing their path, and command the full, annihilating force of the Marines to protect their whims. This impunity creates an absolute moral vacuum, a state of being where cruelty becomes a cure for boredom. Their practice of slavery is the most potent symbol of this rot. They do not take slaves for labor, but as novelties, as pets, as living demonstrations of their power to own and discard life. The brand of the hoof of the soaring dragon is not just a mark of ownership, it is the foundational creed of their world seared into flesh, a declaration that some are born to be masters and others are born to be property." The world government even designs and employs invulnerable, angelic, winged, childlike assassins called seraphim. In Isaiah 6, in the Bible, seraphim, or burning ones, are the highest order of angels who surround God's throne, crying, "Holy, holy, holy." But in One Piece, seraphim are bioengineered clones of warlords, devoid of free will, created by science to enforce the will of the demonic elders. They are soulless angels serving the demiurge. And then you have the judicial hell side. You know, Enies Lobby acts as a court cathedral with gates of justice and theatrical public trials, while Impel Down is literally a multi-layered hell in the series. Maiolo writes, "The mission was no longer to find his friends, a task for which he had no map, but to save his family, a path that led directly into the jaws of hell. The name of that hell was Impel Down." Hancock explained its reputation with a gravity that even her newfound infatuation could not entirely mask. It was the world government's ultimate prison, a submerged fortress of torture and despair from which no one had ever successfully escaped. Known as the Great Gowl, its 6 levels descended into the depths of the sea, each one a more horrific punishment than the last, reserved for the world's most infamous and powerful criminals. To willingly attempt to break into such a place was not just suicidal, it was an act of madness that defied all logic. He goes on to describe the different levels and their names. You have the Crimson Hell, the Wild Beast Hell, the Starvation Hell, the Blazing Hell, the Freezing Hell, and then finally the Eternal Hell. So this is clearly based on the idea of hell, which, whatever you think of that, it's clearly invoking religious ideas in the story. The villains and Emu designed this place, so it's implying that The villains are religious. Maiolo highlights how Oda often returns to the God is evil trope. Concerning when the crew's ship rode a geyser to the heavenly sky world of Skypiea, he writes, "The violent ascent ended as abruptly as it began, the roaring column of water giving way to an eerie, weightless silence. The Going Merry, battered but miraculously intact, breached the cloud line and burst into a world of impossible beauty. They had arrived in the white, white sea, an endless ocean of dense, fluffy clouds that stretched to a horizon where the sky was a deeper, more brilliant blue than they had ever seen. Below them was not water, but a solid-looking sea of clouds, and above, floating upon this ethereal ocean, were islands made of the same condensed vapor. Sky sharks swam through the cloud waves, and the very air felt thin and light. It was a paradise that defied every known law of nature." Their first encounter in this new world was with the Skypians. Skypians? I don't know. A gentle people with small, angelic wings on their backs. A young woman named Conus and her father, Pagaya, welcomed the bewildered pirates, introducing them to the wonders of their home. The most significant of these was the island's unique technology, dials. These mysterious shells, harvested from the remains of sky creatures, possessed the ability to store and release various forms of energy. There were impact dials that could absorb and unleash kinetic force, flame dials that breathed fire, and wind dials that powered their personal watercraft, the elegant and speedy wavers. For the crew, especially Usopp and Nami, this technology was a source of boundless fascination, a testament to the ingenuity born from living in such a fantastical environment. Yet, beneath the serene surface of this skyfaring society lay a palpable and pervasive fear. The Straw Hats soon learned that this paradise was, in fact, a totalitarian state ruled by a being of seemingly limitless power, God Eniru. A man who had seized absolute control of Skypiea 6 years prior, Eniru was a figure of absolute terror, his authority enforced by a quartet of powerful priests and his own devastating ability. He had consumed the Rumble Rumble fruit, a Logia-type devil fruit that granted him the power of lightning itself. He could move at lightning speed, transform his body into pure electricity, and, most terrifyingly, rain down judgment from the heavens in the form of colossal pillars of electrical energy. Eniru's rule was absolute because his surveillance was omnipresent. Through an ability the Skypians called Mantra, he could sense the presence and hear the thoughts of every single person on the island. Okay, this is totally like God. The slightest hint of dissent, a single word spoken against his name, was met with instant, merciless annihilation. The populace lived in a state of enforced piety, their every action and thought policed by a God who could hear their very souls. The Straw Hats, with their loud, boisterous, and uncontrollably free nature, were fundamentally incompatible with such a world. Their innocent arrival had not gone unnoticed, and by refusing to pay the exorbitant entry fee, an act they saw as a simple pirate's prerogative, they had already committed a capital crime. They had stumbled out of a geyser and into a gilded cage, and the wrath of its divine keeper was about to turn upon them. As the body count rose, Eniru's true, terrifying ambition was revealed. His goal was not merely to rule Skypiea, but to obliterate it. The city of gold, Shandora, was the fuel for his grand design, to use its immense treasure to power the Maxim and ascend to what he believed was his rightful home, the fairy Virth, the moon. Once he departed, he would unleash a cataclysmic electrical storm called Rygo, wiping the Sky Islands and everyone on them from existence. The survival game was merely a prelude to genocide. It was into this apocalyptic endgame that Luffy finally arrived, crashing into the scene with his typical unceremonious gusto. The confrontation between the Rubber Boy and the Lightning God was one the entire sky had been waiting for. Eniru, with the arrogant confidence of an invincible being, unleashed a torrent of high-voltage electricity directly at Luffy. The attack connected, and did absolutely nothing. The crew, the Shandians, and Eniru himself could only watch in stunned disbelief as Luffy stood completely unharmed, steam rising from his body. In a moment of beautiful narrative irony, the ultimate weakness of a self-proclaimed god was revealed. Rubber is a natural insulator. Luffy, the simple-minded boy from the Blue Sea, was the one being in the world Eniro's divine power could not harm. Maiolo highlights a character portrayed as a tyrant. He writes, "The most enigmatic and ultimately tragic member of the seven warlords of the sea was the tyrant Bartholomew Kuma, a towering, Bible-carrying cyborg. He was initially presented as a mindless government dog, his paw fruit granting him the terrifying ability to repel anything he touched, from air itself to abstract concepts like pain. His true motives, however, were a deep mystery, his actions often subtly aiding the Straw Hats even as he followed his orders. His story was one of slow, agonizing sacrifice, a secret revolutionary who willingly allowed his consciousness to be erased, his body becoming the prototype for the government's Pacifista weapon program." Hopefully I got that right. Mihawk Dracul is another Christian-themed warlord. Mihawk's surname, Dracul, hints at the vampire connection, like Dracula, but his design also strongly invokes Christian themes. You know, he has a cross-shaped sword and a crucifix pendant. He's aligned, in part, with the government as one of the seven warlords. So, as we'll see in the next video, these aren't just generic evil gods and religious people. One Piece invokes Genesis a lot, and we'll see that next time, as we've already gotten a little hint of that probably in this video. But it's extremely specific in how it incorporates a lot from Genesis and inverts the morality. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and stay tuned.